Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and I am here with my weekly live update. If you are tuning in, make sure to leave a comment, say hello, let me know how your week is going, what you're reading, what you've been up to, anything that you feel like sharing. So as always, I'm going to start this video with my life updates and just kind of talk about what's been going on in my week since the last video. So this week has been pretty good. Nothing really crazy. Oz is in his last week in Angola. So this was like my last week of kind of solo time. My best friend Candace flew in from San Diego last night. So she's here visiting for the weekend. So she was here today and she'll be here until like tomorrow afternoon. So today we got up earlier. We went and had coffee at a local coffee shop, walked Luna through like this area that's like a wash kind of in our neighborhood. And then this afternoon we went and got dumplings over at one of my favorite dumpling houses in Chinatown here in Vegas. So that was enjoyable. And then Oz will be home on Tuesday. He has like a 24-hour flight home from Angola, which is wild. So he actually leaves tomorrow in Angola, but he won't get home until Tuesday here. So I'm very much looking forward to him being home. He's been gone for just over 3 weeks. And so this is actually the longest we've been apart since we've been together. So it's kind of interesting to see how that went. And I'm looking forward to him getting home. And then after that, so I have a week with him home. And the week after that, my mom and I are leaving on a trip. We're going to be road tripping across the Southwest. So we're leaving from Las Vegas. And then we're going to go to Flagstaff, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to hit Tempe, Arizona and come back to Vegas. So we've both been to Santa Fe before. And I've been to Flagstaff and Tempe. I haven't been to Albuquerque aside from like the airport. So we are looking forward to seeing a bit more of the Southwest, stopping at some cool places along the way. My mom is really into little free libraries, so she has picked out a bunch of little free libraries that she wants to check out. So there will be a ton of content from that particular trip. We're going to be going for 5 days, and pretty much the entire trip, since it's just the two of us, is geared around little free libraries and bookstores. And there's a couple like cultural sites that I want to check out if we have time along the way. So it'll be a lot of great bookish content. I'm really looking forward to that as well. I kind of need a little bit of a break, so nice little 5-day trip will be good. Thank you also to everybody that like reached out and was like, hey, hope your medical stuff goes well. I know I mentioned it in the last video, and I think I mentioned something in a post earlier this week, and just a ton of people reached out to say like, hey, hope everything's smooth, hope you're doing okay. I am doing okay. I will probably be having some surgery later, like in April or May. So that was kind of what this appointment was about, was just kind of getting that stuff set up. The good news is that I have a great team and I have like a good environment to go through this in. But the bad news, obviously, that I have to have surgery. But I'm in good shape, good spirits, doing all the things I need to do to take care of myself in preparation of that. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to having Oz home so we can kind of get prepared for all of that. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that's going on at the moment. Just trying to enjoy my best friend here while she's here. And then, I'm really looking forward to Oz getting home. And then after that, some time road tripping with my mom. Things that are coming up for this channel. So the end of the Octo Finals for the BookTube prize is coming up. Our votes are due on the 30th. So I have just about finished all of the books. I have like a little tiny bit left on my very last one. And I wanted to give myself a little bit of time to think about how I was going to rank the different books, because honestly, all 6 books that I got were so interesting and so good. If someone was going to tailor make a book list for me, this was it. I was a little nervous when I got the nonfiction genre, and then I saw the topics that all of my books were about, and I just was like, man, this is like, if I couldn't make myself a better list, essentially. So trying to pick what should be like the best book and what should be the worst book is kind of difficult. So I wanted to give myself a little time and space to think that through. I also am hoping to be halfway through reading the women's prize list. So I have finished this week 1, 2, 3 books from the women's prize list. And last week I finished 3 technically. So I have 6 out of 16 read. So this week I'm hoping to finish like probably another 3. That'll put me at 9. And then that gives me, basically if I finish 3 books a week from the women's prize list, I should easily complete the long list before the short list is announced. I'm really enjoying my reading for this so far. I wasn't sure because, sometimes prize lists can be hit and miss, but I feel like the books have been pretty strong and pretty diverse and interesting this year. At least the ones I've read so far have been very varied. Stylistically, maybe not as varied. They have that kind of literary prosy sort of a vibe, but in terms of content, I feel like they have had quite a bit of a variety. So I'm enjoying that a lot more than I expected, in fact. And I think I'm getting more out of the books than I initially anticipated. There was definitely some books on this list where I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like that one. And I've been pleasantly surprised thus far. So let's get into the books that I have read this week. And let me tell you, I got a ton of reading done this week. And that is because, again, Oz is gone. So I've had plenty of alone time to be reading. And then I also had a less busy week at work this week. The week prior was really crazy busy. So this week was much more mellow, better staffed. And so I've had more free time to read. So this is a lot of books, even a lot of books for me. I don't typically get through quite this much. So I've been working my way through Nine of Swords by Brooklyn Quintana. This was one of my March of the Mammoth selections, and I finally finished it. I enjoyed this. This was a fun start to a series. There's the action, the adventure, boy going through challenges and overcoming obstacles. So if you like an epic adventure, this is a fun one to pick up. So I think I finished the last 150 pages of that this week. Hey, Brian, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. And then I got to Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. So this was one of my selections for Irish Readathon. I wanted to make sure I read at least a couple books by Irish readers because last year I wanted to do Irish Readathon and then got to none of my books by Irish authors. This one for me was just okay. It's about a character named Kushla, and it is about her life during the Troubles in Ireland. But honestly, it's mostly about her relationship with this man. And I will say the first half of the book I found really dull and boring. And it was a lot of whining about what she wanted from this man who is married. And honestly, I found myself really frustrated with her character because I was like, you're with somebody that is clearly not going to prioritize you, but you want him to make you a priority, but you're not really setting yourself up for success here. The second part of the book got a little more interesting because the IRA and the Troubles and all that kind of got tied in. And so I found it picked up a little bit more. But overall, this one was okay for me. The writing was very lovely, but I just felt like it was a little bit more whiny than I was expecting, I guess. I also read Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boulley. This is the same author that wrote Firekeeper's Daughter. I really loved Firekeeper's Daughter, and so I was very excited when Book of the Month featured this one. This was solid. I won't say that it was as good as Firekeeper's Daughter, but it was well written, and the plot was pretty interesting. This talks a lot about the repatriation of ancestral remains to Indigenous tribes, which is a subject that I don't know as much as I feel like I should know about. This in particular talks about the laws that allow people to keep private collections of Indigenous artifacts and Indigenous remains. So if you're a museum or a university and it comes to light that you have remains or artifacts that belong to an Indigenous tribe in the United States, they have the ability to claim those remains, but there is a period in which the museum or the university is allowed to study and do research to make sure, I guess, that it's going to the right place, which kind of leaves tribes in this long-term limbo trying to get, these artifacts back. And it's even worse, if somebody has privately held artifacts, there's, I guess, not much recourse or a way to force them to give those remains back. And then there's a loophole where if the university or the museum gives the remains an ambiguous, oh, this is from the Northwest, but we don't have a specific tribe, then they can avoid returning those remains. So this really focused on that a lot. Our main character in this book, she's really focused on how to get remains repatriated and get a hold of cultural items. So I found it really interesting. It's maybe not as exciting or as fast-paced as Firekeeper's Daughter, but I thought it was a very, very interesting subject. I like Trespasses more than you. I think it all comes down to how much you like the main character. I agree. Definitely, it's very character-focused. So if you don't love Kushla, then it's hard to enjoy the book. I found Kushla to be kind of a frustrating character. I didn't relate to her in a lot of ways, and I felt really frustrated with a lot of her decisions. And so this is in regards to trespasses if you're just logging in. And so for me, the book was hard. I didn't enjoy necessarily being in her perspective the whole story. And I didn't love a lot of her choices at the beginning of the story. So it just, for me, it wasn't poorly written. The writing was beautiful. It just, I didn't resonate with her character that much. Okay, and then I got to The Bullet Swallower by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. I finished this at the beginning of the week. I can't remember if I talked about this in my last update. I think I just said I was going to read it. I can't remember if I actually talked about the book itself. Yeah, I can see that. Fair enough. I mean, I think, with any character in any book, some people are going to resonate with that character, some people are not. So, that's the beauty of reading and reviewing books, is that we all take different things from different books based on our life experiences. And, I see a lot of value in that. I appreciate that I miss things all the time. So sometimes people leave comments and they're like, oh, hey, I took this from this book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that went completely over my head. So the joy of reading is that, we all take different things. So Bullet Swallower, like I said, I can't remember if I already reviewed this in my last update because I finished it right at the beginning of the week. I think I just said I was going to read it this week, but I enjoyed this one. It's two different POVs. We have a back in the day POV of a gentleman who is essentially like a cowboy in a bendy, though he's robbing trains and kind of just not living on the straight and narrow. And then we have a later generation closer to modern times. The gentleman is an actor and he gets a hold of a book that tells the family history and all their wrongdoings and kind of talks about a curse. And so this kind of focuses on how the curse has been passed down from generation to generation, and then how the current generation is trying to break the curse. I liked this. I thought that this was a very visual experience for me, reading the scenes, especially the past POV with the cowboy. It was very visual. I could really imagine what was happening. I appreciated the two different characters. This was a little bit short. I actually kind of wanted it to be just a tiny bit longer, but I found it to be a pretty enjoyable ride. And I am not a super big reader of Westerns. And this definitely has some very Western elements to it, but I really appreciated it and I liked it. I also was a little nervous about the dual POVs because sometimes when you have a past timeline and a present timeline, I find the present timeline can be really cliche or used as a tool to kind of piece the narrative together a little bit instead of being really meaningful. But I felt in this particular book that both timelines were meaningful and added to the story. So I appreciated that. I also read, for middle grade March, I read Hamra and the Jungle of Memories by Hannah Alkoff. This is a middle grade book that is about a young girl, and it's mostly about her grandmother and dementia. So her grandmother is suffering from dementia. It's set during the COVID lockdown. So this young girl is kind of stuck at home taking care of her grandparents while her parents are working as frontline workers. And she's experiencing frustration and kind of resentment towards having to deal with her grandmother and her mood swings, her inability to remember things. It's not just frustration. She's also sad because the grandma that she was raised with isn't remembering her, and the dementia is progressing. And so she goes out into the jungle. She encounters a tiger, and this tiger is a magical tiger, and they go on kind of a journey to help this tiger. And in helping this tiger, she hopes that she'll be able to help her grandmother remember who she is. Having had a grandmother that had Parkinson's disease and in the late stages suffered from severe dementia, I really related to this in a lot of ways. It's a painful experience watching a loved one lose their ability to recognize family members, to start hallucinating and remembering things that are in the past, mixing things up. So I thought that was very delicately handled, and I thought it was handled in a way that would make it very understandable for a child that was going through that. I think that's one of the things that I'm really learning to appreciate about middle grades. And I don't read middle grades often, but every year for middle grade March, I try to pick 3 of them. And I'm just constantly impressed with how delicately these middle grade books handle really difficult subjects. I think that it is fantastic that writers that write middle grade books do not approach children like they're too like young or immature or like not knowledgeable enough to understand these difficult subjects. I think instead they really help to put things in context for young readers. Dementia is a deep subject for middle grade. It is, but the thing that I think that's interesting about this is like dementia and like family members suffering from dementia isn't like, it's not like you get a conversation where the universe is like, oh, hey, you're only 9 or 10, you're too young to understand dementia. Like if your grandmother or grandfather is going through dementia, you have to learn to deal with it no matter what age you're at. And so I think having a middle grade book that touches on it in an age appropriate way is important. And I felt like this really handled this quite delicately. I could see like if a child was dealing with this on their own, that it could really help them get through a difficult topic. The second middle grade book that I read was called Samir, the Seller. Sorry, it has a really long title. Let me double check it. Samir, the Many Assassinations of Samir the Seller and the Seller of Dreams. And it is by Daniel Nayeri. So this is about the Silk Road. Oh, very true. I'm always impressed by how middle grade authors tackle difficult topics. Yeah. So that happened to me last year too. I read How to Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller, and that one was super impressive. It also talked about like aging and a little bit about dementia and things like that. And I thought that was a super emotional read as well. And that was kind of like the first one that I was like, wow, there's a lot more depth to middle grade than I expected. I just finished Milkweed, a middle grade book about a young boy's experience during World War II. It was an emotional, powerful book. See, this is what I mean. It's like, it's so impressive when you start delving into middle grade books. I think, because I haven't been around kids and like kids literature for a long time, I had that impression of it being really simple and super immature. And there's just a world of depth out there in terms of middle grade. So I really love that. And I don't know that I'll like incorporate a ton of middle grade books in my reading normally, but it does make me like less hesitant to pick up middle grade books when I hear about ones that are like winning all sorts of awards and stuff. So The Many Assassinations of Samir, the Seller of Dreams by Daniel Nayeri. This was my second middle grade book that I read this week. This is about the Silk Road. We have a young boy that is called Monk, and he is saved by Samir. Samir makes a bargain for Monk to come with him, and Monk feels kind of duty bound to Samir. So Samir is like a hustler, kind of a scammer or a con artist, and he sells things for exaggerated prices. He kind of, he always gets the best end of the bargain, basically. And so a lot of people are angry with Samir and, they're out to get him. And so Monk feels duty bound to save Samir 7 times. And this is just about their journey through the Silk Road. And it's kind of a found family story. This one wasn't as deep or as meaningful to me as the book that I just mentioned, Hammer and the Jungle of Memories. This one was more kind of an adventure, fun story. There's a lot of humor in it. It was a quick read and it was an easy read. It was relatively enjoyable, but it didn't have the same emotional impact. This would be just something that I think, would be a fun adventure story for people. Other than that, I finished couple other books that I do not have physical copies of. So I finished The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This was a fantastic book. I've been really on a horror kick. I think I started reading pretty extensively in horror last year, and I'm just really, really enjoying the genre. I have never read Due before, but I've heard fantastic things about their writing, and The Reformatory sounded really, really good. It seems like it's been receiving rave reviews by everyone that's read it so far. I will just add to the chorus of voices and say that if you like horror, especially horror that's anchored in reality, this is a really fantastic read. It's brutal. It's disturbing because, again, it's anchored in reality. The author's actual inspiration is based on a family member and some of their personal experiences. But it was very, very effective. It's haunting in a lot of ways. It's maddening in a lot of ways. It's educating about history. It's just a really well-balanced book. And it's a fairly long book, but it doesn't read like it's a long book. It reads really, really fast. So if you're into horror, especially kind of a historical fiction-based horror, I would definitely recommend that. I also read Son of Blood and Ruin by Marielle Lares. And this is a fantasy based on Aztec culture in Mexico, with all the heavy reading I've been doing this week, I was like, I need just like a good old fantasy to kind of break things up. And that's pretty much what this was. We have a young woman who is half indigenous, half Spanish, and she basically is not quite indigenous. She's not quite indigenous enough to be like part of the indigenous tribe, but she's also not quite Spanish enough to be like of the social status that her father was of. She's like stuck in this weird gray area where neither side really trusts her fully. But she has some interesting powers, and she has an alter ego. She's kind of almost like a superhero, and she dresses up as a jaguar and goes out and like defends the indigenous people and like fights off crime and stuff. It was a pretty cool concept. She was a really interesting main character. I loved the usage of like Aztec roots and incorporation of Aztec culture. I have traveled pretty extensively through Mexico, and I have visited quite a few Aztec heritage sites and archaeological ruins and things like that. And so I loved hearing things that I've learned about kind of mixed into a fantasy story. I thought the utilization of that culture was really interesting. This was a pretty enjoyable book. I listened to it on audiobook, and the narration was really good as well. I appreciated that the actress that was narrating it was doing all of the accents effectively. Like, so for the Spanish people, she picked up like a Spaniard accent. And then, she pronounced like all of the Aztec words really well. It was just really, really smooth. She switched between English and Spanish and Aztec, like very, very fluidly. And that is a challenge. Let's see. The Reformatory sounds so good. I really enjoyed the Nickel Boys. So it'd be interesting to read in that setting again with a horror twist. So I haven't read the Nickel Boys, but I believe that's Colson Whitehead, and I've heard really fantastic things about that. I think that if you enjoy historical settings and you enjoy horror, you're going to most likely really enjoy the Reformatory. I think it's a really good balance. It was really, really well done. I mean, I would probably recommend it to anyone that likes historical fiction with horror. I think it's just a really well-handled book. So that brings me to what I read for the Women's Prize this week rather. So I put up a review for this already, but I read Western Lane by Chetna Maru. This was a book I was really skeptical about reading, probably the one on this list that I was like least excited about because I heard that it revolved around squash. What I found is it's much more of a meditation on grief and how we might throw ourselves into a sport or hobby to kind of deal with that grief, to kind of help to compartmentalize that grief and how to move forward. It's a quiet book. It's not as prosy as the other books. It's very like simple writing style, but I think that's to allow us into the head of the main character who's like 11 years old. And I think that to sound authentic to an 11-year-old, you really wouldn't be using like purple prose. So not as bad as I expected. Probably not my favorite on the list, but I don't think it was a bad book at all. And then I read Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan. This one was good. It is about a family in Ireland. There is the death of a child, and people are being blamed for it that really didn't have much to do with it. But we basically see a bunch of dysfunctional people, and it was good. I think it was a lot different than I was expecting. I kind of was expecting more of like a mystery element, and really I felt like it was very character driven and very quiet. I'm still kind of musing over my thoughts on it. I finished it like a day ago, and I kind of need more time to process it and kind of fully articulate what I think about it. And then I read River East, River West by Abe Ray Lescure. This was actually probably one of the books I was most looking forward to on the Women's Prize list. And it was pretty much everything I think I was hoping it was going to be. We got a look into China in terms of someone living in China through the Cultural Revolution, and as China became more open to outsiders. We got a look at an American immigrant that went to China and what life is like living there during this time period. And then we have a look at this girl who is born in China. She's half Chinese and half American. And she grows up like in the traditional Chinese schools and Chinese culture and everything. And then as a teenager, she starts going to an American school. And her experiences are really interesting. It's kind of, in her part, like a very much a coming of age story. And I love that it's kind of anti-American dream story. So, we get all these stories of people like, oh, I want to move to America and like life there is going to be better. But I appreciated that this was the exact reverse. it was the exact reverse. We have a character that moves to China and really appreciates China for what it is and her experiences there and loves it very much and doesn't want to return to the United States. So I really appreciated seeing that perspective. I felt like that was a little bit different than a lot of the immigrant stories that I see here in the States. I think this one was really well written. I also just finished this recently, so I don't have super coherent thoughts, and I don't necessarily want to go into great detail on this update anyways, because I'm planning to do review videos for each of the Women's Prize books. But yeah, fantastic. I think I really liked that one. Probably one of my favorite ones so far. So those are all of the books that I have read this week, which as you can see is quite a bit. In fairness, like 4 of these are really, really short. The 2 middle grade ones that I read were really short, as was Western Lane and Ordinary Human Failings. Not real heavy books. And then the Bullet Swallower you can also see is a pretty thin book. So that is that for reading updates. Now, as for what I plan to read this week. So, oh no, where did my other book? Oh, there it is. So exciting. I finally got my copy of In Defense of the Act by Effie Black. This is, as you can see, one of the books that was longlisted for the Women's Prize. This was one of the few books. There's 4 books that I could not get through my library. And so I had to purchase them. And this was one of them. I had to ship it over from the UK. It took me like a week and a half to get this. So it finally came in. This is also a really short read. So I anticipate banging this out pretty quickly. I actually already kind of perused through the first few pages, and it sounds like it's going to be a really interesting one. And I love the cover of this. I love that this is like the only really bright book on the list. I also got A Trace of the Sun. I think I mentioned this last week, but I had to order this in from the UK as well. So I think I'll probably be starting this week. This one's a little bit thicker, so I want to give myself time. With the Women's Prize ones, I'm also trying really hard not to rush through them. I want to like give myself time to like mull them over and kind of really dig deep and think about the meaning. So I'm not just like missing stuff. Sounds like you had a pretty good reading week. I did. I had a really good reading week. I think overall, everything was pretty strong. Even the ones that weren't strong were not bad. Like Trespasses, you know, it's a disconnect with the character, but the writing was really good. And I would say that was probably like my least favorite book of the week. Otherwise, and even that, like I said, I wouldn't rate badly. It just wasn't like my favorite. Yeah, really solid. So I got those 2 books for the Women's Prize. I will definitely be reading those. I also just got 8 Lives of a Trickster from the library. That's also one of the Women's Prize books. And I have started the first chapter of that. I'm enjoying it so far. So I will probably finish that this week as well. If I get through those, then also on my list is Julia 1984 by Sandra Newman. I've been hearing nothing but amazing things about this. I actually want to do a reread of 1984, the original, because it's been a long time since I've read it, and kind of compare these side by side. So I'm hoping I'll have time to do both of those this week. And then I'm hoping to maybe get to The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. I hear a bunch of really good things about this. I don't know much about it because I hear there's like big twists in it. So I've been trying to not read up on it. I kind of want to just be surprised. And I might also try to pick up Familia by Lauren E. Rico. This is one that I've been wanting to read for quite a while. This is about 2 sisters, one in Puerto Rico, one in the States. They were separated when they were children, and they were reconnected by a DNA test. And I think there's kind of like a mystery element of like how this one sister ended up in the States and how one got stuck in Puerto Rico. I am really interested in this one, and I really want to get to it, but obviously I have to kind of prioritize some of the prize reading right now because that's more time sensitive. So those are my plans for reading this week. I think this whole month has been really solid, honestly. So I'm hoping this last week of the month will continue to be really solid reading as well. I'm also done with the BookTube prize reading, so I'm going to probably give myself like a tiny break on nonfiction for the week because I've read a ton of nonfiction over the last couple months, and I'm really enjoying it. But I think I want to try to maybe incorporate a little bit more fun reading this week. Between the prize reading, the BookTube prize reading, and the Women's Prize reading, I feel like I'm reading a lot of like really deep, serious books, and that's great. I love learning about deep, serious topics and like hearing deep, serious discussions. But sometimes, you know, you need to like spice it up and like read some stuff that's a little bit like lighter. So yeah, maybe I'll incorporate some fantasy this week or something like that as well. So that's about it. Next week is going to be busy. Like I said, my best friend's here till tomorrow night. And then Oz gets home the next day, and I'm really looking forward to Oz being home. And then I just got to get through one week, and my mom and I are off on this road trip So if you really enjoy the little free library road trip videos that I shoot, we will be shooting several of those, probably like one for each location, just because my mom has lined up so many cool things with little free libraries. And then we will definitely be doing some book shopping. There's some cool bookstores in all of the different cities we're going to. So expect some book shopping videos. I'm going to probably space them out throughout the month instead of like uploading them all in the same week. We will continue to be posting Women's Prize review videos as I finish these books. So next week, I'll probably post a couple of those. And then upcoming after that would be like my TBR video, my new booktuber shout outs. I will be doing that this week, probably towards like midweek. And so TBR, end of the month wrap up, booktuber shout outs, and more review videos. That's kind of what's on the docket coming up. So that being said, I hope everybody's doing really well. I hope that this week was a positive week for you, whether it meant reading a bunch of good books, whether it meant accomplishing personal goals, whether it meant giving yourself some time to rest and recover energy, whatever makes the week good for you. I hope that happened this week. And I hope going into the upcoming week that you have some good books to read. I hope you have exciting things planned. And I hope that, I talked about last week self-care a lot. I spent my weekend last week doing a lot of self-care. I actually went and dyed my hair red, in case you didn't notice, and got a pedicure and a massage and all that. And so I'm trying to remember that self-care doesn't always have to be grand gestures like that, taking yourself out. It can also be like, making some time to meditate or do some yoga or making time to read a book. So I hope that you also give yourself time for balance and self-care this week as well. So thank you for everybody that stopped by. It was nice chatting with everybody, and have a happy Sunday. See you soon. Bye.